Travis gripped the steering wheel. He stared at the old farmhouse. It was creepy even in the daylight.
You sure about this?
Jeff, his best friend, grinned.
You scared?
He teased.
No way.
Travis lied. He parked the truck. They were here on a dare. People said the farmhouse was haunted.
Let's do this.
Jeff said, grabbing his ghost hunting gear. Travis took a deep breath. He hoped this wouldn't be a mistake. The inside of the farmhouse was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hung everywhere. The air felt heavy and cold. Travis shivered.
You feel that?
He whispered. Jeff nodded, his eyes wide with excitement. They slowly walked through the house. Each room was emptier and creepier than the last. They reached the master bedroom. The air grew colder. Travis felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Something felt wrong, really wrong. A cold wind slammed the bedroom door shut, echoing through the empty halls like a ghostly whisper. The sudden noise shattered the silence, sending a chill down their spines. Travis and Jeff spun around, their hearts pounding in their chests. They exchanged a glance, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. A dark shadow swirled in the center of the room, its presence palpable and suffocating. It seemed to draw the light out of the room, leaving only darkness in its wake. It grew larger and more menacing with each passing second. Then it screamed, a horrible, ear-splitting scream that seemed to pierce their very souls. Travis felt his blood turn to ice. His hands trembled as he tried to steady himself, the terror gripping him like a vice. He fumbled for his EMF reader, his fingers barely able to grasp it. The device spiked to 5, the highest reading they had ever seen.
What is that thing? Jeff's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes locked on the shadow.
Travis stammered, his voice trembling. I don't know, he managed to say, his mind racing with possibilities. The shadow began to move towards them, its form shifting and writhing as if it were alive. It seemed to feed off their fear, growing stronger with each step, its shape distorted and twisted, becoming more grotesque and terrifying. The air grew colder, and the sense of dread became almost unbearable. The shadow lunged, its form barely discernible in the dim light. It moved with a speed that defied logic, a blur of darkness that seemed to swallow the very air around it.
It knocked my journal to the floor with a force that sent dust flying. The pages fluttered open, revealing notes and sketches that now seemed insignificant in the face of this terror.
When Travis picked it up, he saw something written in swirling black ink. The letters seemed to dance and writhe on the page, forming words that chilled him to the bone.
Fuck off and die, it read. The message was scrawled in a hurried, almost frantic hand, as if the writer had been in a state of panic or rage.
Travis screamed. He turned to run to get help, but the house seemed to close in around him. The walls felt like they were moving, shifting to trap him inside.
But Jeff was frozen in place, his eyes wide with terror. I didn't want to leave him. His face was pale, and his body trembled as if he was fighting an invisible force.
Then he heard a sickening crack. Jeff's head slumped over at an unnatural angle. He collapsed to the floor, his body lifeless and still. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow all hope. Travis didn't wait to see any more. The sight on the screen was enough to send chills down his spine. He had always been skeptical about the supernatural, but what he saw now was undeniable. The shadowy figure, the eerie presence, it was all too real. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead and his heart pounded in his chest. He knew he had to get out of there, and fast. He ran. He ran faster than he'd ever run before. His legs pumped like pistons, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The rural road stretched out before him, but he didn't care where it led. All he knew was that he had to put as much distance as possible between himself and that house. The fields blurred past him, and the only sound he could hear was the pounding of his own heart and the rustling of the wind in the tall grass.
I burst out of the house and into the sunlight. The brightness was almost blinding after the dim, haunted interior. I could feel the warmth on my skin, but it did little to calm my racing heart. I glanced back only once, just to make sure that the shadowy figure wasn't following me. The house loomed ominously behind me, a dark silhouette against the bright sky. I knew I had to keep moving. I scrambled into the truck, my hands shaking too badly to even start the engine. My fingers fumbled with the keys, slipping and missing the ignition. Panic surged through me as I imagined the shadowy figure getting closer. Finally, the engine roared to life and I felt a small measure of relief. But I knew I wasn't safe yet. I had to get as far away as possible.
He glanced at the monitor for the security camera he'd set up inside. The grainy footage showed the interior of the house, now eerily still. But then movement caught his eye. The shadowy figure was there, hovering over Jeff's body. It was a sight that would be burned into his memory forever. The figure seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and Travis felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He watched in horror as the shadow hovered over Jeff's body. It was as if the very essence of darkness had taken form. Jeff had been his best friend, and now he lay there, lifeless, with that thing looming over him. Travis felt a surge of helplessness and anger. He wanted to do something, anything, to save his friend, but he knew it was too late. The shadow had already claimed its victim.
I knew I had to do something. I grabbed my camera, ran back inside, and took a picture of Jeff's lifeless body. The flash illuminated the room for a brief moment, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I hoped that the photograph would serve as proof of what had happened, that it would help others understand the danger that lurked in that house. But as I looked at Jeff's lifeless form, I felt a deep sense of loss and regret. I should have never brought him here. Then I ran back to the truck, started the engine, and drove away. The tires screeched on the gravel as I sped down the road. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I couldn't shake the image of Jeff's body or the shadowy figure that had taken him. I knew I had to get as far away as possible, but I also knew that I would never be able to escape the memories of that day.
As he drove, he made a vow. Never again. He would never go ghost hunting again. The thrill of the unknown, the excitement of the chase, it wasn't worth the cost. He had lost his best friend, and he had come face to face with something that defied explanation. The dark countryside stretched out before him, and he felt a deep sense of dread. He knew that he would carry the scars of this experience for the rest of his life. Never again, he repeated to himself. Never again.